right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Jan. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Retalon, and I will be sharing with you what kind of questions we've been getting from retailers, as well as how retail AI and predictive analytics can help businesses to navigate through the coronavirus crisis, recover, and prosper. Immediately following this 20 to 25 minute presentation, we will open it up to a Q&A with Retalon CEO Mark Krupnik and Vice President of Sales Diane McCoubrey, both of which have extensive experience with enterprise retail analytics systems and have been having discussions on the effects of the crisis with retailers and other industry leaders every day for several weeks. Please make sure you submit your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to them at the end. All right, let's get into it. The ongoing global pandemic is a truly unprecedented event that is impacting the entire retail supply chain, from factories and suppliers to customers and employees. Another interesting fact is that not all retailers are actually facing the same challenges. We have essential retailers that have remained open, while many others were forced to close their stores. Some are using select stores as an online order fulfillment node, while others are only shipping from warehouses and distribution centers. Also, the outbreak has unexpectedly slowed demand for certain products, while other products are experiencing a massive surge that results in out of stocks and lost sales. But no matter where your business falls on the spectrum of these challenges, there's one thing that all retailers have in common, and that is that in order to evaluate the current situation, effectively operate in a dynamic environment, and build realistic plans, all retailers can really strongly benefit from advanced retail analytics. Now, actually, before we jump into it, I do want to clarify something right away. There is a common question that we get these days, which has been, how can you forecast anything when there's no data to base decisions on? And that's a fair question. There are some that are of the opinion that AI and predictive analytics is unreliable right now due to too much unpredictability. However, we're seeing that on the contrary, now is the time when you need this technology the most to make sense of things. Now, so sure, it's fair to say that few on earth could have predicted this crisis. As you can see, there were no Google searches for this term, and all of a sudden it seems like that's what everyone is talking about. Some of you may have started to think about this in January when your factories and your suppliers were impacted in China, but for the majority of us, it was just in the past 2-3 weeks that this has really hit our radar and affected our businesses and personal lives. So who could have forecasted that, right? But now it's been several months since the initial outbreak in several different countries, and there's certainly some data coming in. There are hundreds of companies, universities, and government organizations running models on this data and monitoring changes in real time from around the world. Two of the most notable projections come from the Washington University and the Imperial College in the UK. This one on the left is from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluations, and it's actually a very interactive dashboard with projections for each state in the United States. So you can actually use this URL here and check it out for yourself after the webinar. Now, what's important and why I'm bringing this up is that most of these models are actually predicting similar forecasts, mainly that serious cases will spike during this month in North America and will slowly decline over the next several months. Now, of course, this is dependent on federal and local government response, the kind of restrictions that are implemented, and how the population will behave. Now, another speculation is that there may be another wave of outbreaks at the end of the year as we enter the colder months and the flu season. The point here is that it is highly unlikely that lockdown will just be lifted before we are well into the summer. And it will likely be a gradual return that won't fully occur until the first quarter of 2021 by most models. Now, another important thing to consider here is that not all regions have the same infection rates. This is just a map of the United States, but Canada isn't too different. This means that if you have stores in multiple states or provinces, the process of closing stores or opening stores, as well as consumer behaviors, will certainly vary. So needless to say, it's going to be a very turbulent 12 to 18 months ahead. We believe that this moment is going to be a catalyst for a retail paradigm shift. This event will definitely accelerate the digital transformation of retail. It will also highlight the importance of sustainable retailing. And companies that adopt technology during this time, including robotics, true unified commerce, AI, predictive analytics, and in store technology, will strongly recover and prevail as leaders. In fact, this actually reminds me of a funny picture that's been floating around LinkedIn and Twitter. Who has led the digital transformation at your company? It's certainly been interesting to see how we've been able to adapt fairly quickly here at Retalon. So, how can retailers use AI to overcome today's challenges and build the best foundation for a stronger recovery tomorrow? Here are 7 ways that retail AI will help your business recover in this economic downturn. We've ordered them by short, medium, and long-term strategies. I'm now going to briefly discuss each of these and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. We definitely want to hear your feedback on any of these areas or other things that are on your mind. So again, as you watch the webinar, we encourage you to put your questions into the comment box, or if there's any issues with that, you can always email us at discover@retalon.com. So let's take a look at the short term. These are some of the decisions you're already making and that should be in your immediate focus. Let's take a look at some of the questions that retailers are actually asking themselves today. What orders do I need to cancel or reroute? Should I move inventory from stores to my DCs? Where should I be ideally fulfilling online orders from? How do I replenish and balance inventory across all of my operational locations or just distribution centers, if that's all I have running right now? How has the outbreak changed demand for specific products? Which are the most critical products today? How are the changes in weather as things start warming up and you start reopening stores going to affect sales? How about lead time variability? Do I need to adjust my prices, promotions? Should I put end of life merchandise on markdowns? It's going to be very difficult to answer any of these questions or make any decisions if you don't have a reliable demand forecast to base them on. So the first thing that I'd like to focus on is the ability to create what-if scenarios and generate forecasts and recommendations around that. You start by making some assumptions based on how the crisis is unfolding and some business-specific decisions that you've had to make, right? So tell the system that you're closing your stores, your DCs will be fulfilling the orders. Some products may come directly from vendors. Maybe you're going to put minimum orders on some items. There might be restrictions on other items. You lay out the scenario of how your business will operate. Then allow the AI engine to forecast demand based on the new data, business rules, and the what-if scenarios that you've just detailed. You will then be able to get smarter recommendations for how to optimize your business within these assumptions and projected demand. You will be able to see suggested purchase orders, optimal allocation suggestions, assortment recommendations, pricing, promotions, markdowns, and so on. And at the end of the day, this also means that you'll have a much clearer visibility into your business. You'll actually see what your product, location, vendor performance looks like, your costs, your risks, and opportunities. Manually adjusting your data to account for these ongoing and dynamic changes is impossible. And that's why retailers will often resort to making more general decisions at higher levels that are often ineffective and highly inaccurate. This particular step is very important because it gives the foundation to base the rest of the decisions that you make on in a very volatile and uncertain environment. The next thing you will want to look at right away is how has each product and category been affected by the lockdown? There are products that would typically see an increase in demand right now that have gone into a complete nosedive, while other unexpected products are experiencing a surge in demand. In fact, some retailers have not only temporarily discontinued some merchandise, but were also able to pivot and produce personal protection equipment and other essential products that are in very high demand right now. So just to illustrate what I'm talking about, here's some new trends that we are seeing coming from e-commerce retailers in Asia. Now, this is just an example to illustrate my point. You can see the fastest growing categories on my left, fastest declining categories on my right. As many of you anticipated, you can see that as customers are stuck at home, there's an increased demand for things like bread machines, home workout equipment, computer monitors, and craft kits. Meanwhile, obviously, automotive products and event supplies are quickly seeing a decline. I'm sure this isn't surprising, and this is a good start, but we need to look at this even more granularly, past the category level. You need to understand how every single product at each location, even if in this case it means a regional distribution center, has been affected. There's a good chance that there are products that are behaving as outliers within broader categories. An AI engine can look at your business very granularly and identify these hidden opportunities. You'll be able to reprioritize your products or recalculate your contribution codes, as we call it in our system, which will allow you to maintain a higher in-stock percent on key products and will assist you in adjusting your plans, which we're going to get to shortly. Now, another decision that retailers need to make on the short term is scheduling labor. We've been hearing that temporary layoffs, shutdowns, quarantines, and unpredictable demand has been putting strain on the ability to effectively schedule labor in advance. By basing labor decisions on a dynamic demand projection, our system can help you determine how to schedule labor to operate efficiently. Now, once you've got the first few weeks out of the way, you will need to start looking forward at the next several months. So we're talking about the next 2 to 5 months from now, depending on how long the lockdown will happen. It's safe to say that this situation isn't going to likely change in the next several weeks. As I pointed out earlier, not all retailers are facing the same challenges, so you may not be dealing with seasonal inventory. However, for many other retailers, like fashion and apparel businesses, unfortunately, the global outbreak has already taken a toll on some products. As the weather gets warmer and we get past Easter, some retailers may be stuck with inventory that is coming to end of life. While some businesses will rush to liquidate inventory at all costs, Retail AI can mitigate your loss and protect your profit margins. An AI-powered markdown tool will identify all products across your business that have poor sell-through rates and are approaching the end of the season. The system will then automatically recommend a markdown strategy to sell the product by end of life with the highest possible gross margin, and of course accounting for new demand projections. Now, when it comes to planning, all the plans you've made, whether it's financial, merchandise, assortment, store plans, or others, they will all need to be obviously revisited. Having new information on demand, store statuses, new product priorities, and updated financials, you will need to adjust these plans, starting with short-term plans since these are the ones you will have the most ability to execute. Now, unlike traditional planning, the AI-powered planning solution will be able to incorporate this new volatile data that is affected by the coronavirus crisis and help retailers make these short-term plans. So you'll be able to account for new demand projections in your plan. You'll have the ability to create multiple plans based on those what-if scenarios. And also by having a unified approach to analytics and by connecting planning with inventory management, you'll have greater visibility, accuracy, and at the end of the day, ability to execute the plan. Now, another way that AI and predictive analytics will help retailers in the medium term is when you start to open up your stores again. So this may be happening at reduced hours, limited stores, or by certain regions. What we do know is that returning to quote unquote normal operations will not happen overnight. It will be a gradual transition that will come likely in waves. So there will be several questions that you'll be asking yourselves at this point, such as, how do I build up store assortment and inventory levels without unnecessary overstock? How do I effectively switch allocation and replenishment processes back to the stores? How will the outbreak permanently affect my e-commerce business? How do I use my stores as an order fulfillment node? How much inventory should I be holding back in my DC? If suppliers have limited inventory, how will I effectively allocate this constrained inventory across my business? How early do I need to make orders with suppliers to protect myself? And here's the reality. You will need to start asking yourself these questions well before stores open up again. Retalon's AI is able to evaluate many factors, such as the impact of the crisis on demand, vendor lead time variability and risk volatility, ongoing e-commerce demand, demand at the newly reopened stores, and many other factors that impact demand and sales that we're typically accounting for our customers already in our predictive analytics engine, such as seasonality, price elasticity, capacities, promotional effects, and so on. The system will then suggest optimal purchase orders to ramp up your business well in advance to protect you from supply chain risks while minimizing inventory costs. Now, remember that your suppliers overseas may be on a different recovery timeline, so you should expect some continued disruptions, and that's why planning this out early is very important. Now, finally, in the long term, you will need to navigate the ripple effects of the crisis, avoid the bullwhip effect of your supply chain, and face some new realities and trends. We're now talking about 6 months to 18 months from now and beyond. One of the most important ways that Retalon's AI will help your business is cleaning your data. This is a topic of discussion that we're going to have for some time as we recover from this crisis. Some retailers are going to realize the challenge with this early on and start working towards it, while others, unfortunately, are going to realize it a little bit too late. You will want to avoid the garbage in, garbage out effect on your data. So, since the following year's demand, supply, sales, and even product priorities will look significantly different than 2020, using any forecasting method, whether it's statistical, predictive analytics, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, it will be meaningless. You will need to clean your data before you work on it. What you will want to know going into 2021 is how much of this item would I sell at this location if there was no crisis last year? Not only will 2020's data not be reliable, but so will previous years, unfortunately. Just think about how much change your business typically experiences year to year under normal circumstances, right? New trends, new products, new models, store closures, store openings, demographic changes, competition, vendor cost changes, price changes, different promotions, moving holidays, and I can go on and on and on. Now imagine how unreliable 2018 and 2019 data will be. Retalon's AI will help you identify the effect of this pandemic's event down to every single store SKU combination. It will clean your data to offer you a clearer picture of true demand in your business that you can base reliable decisions on. It can identify and incorporate new trends that have emerged and continue to monitor, learn, and anticipate changes in your business and consumer behavior. At the end of the day, both retailers and consumers will come out of this pandemic with some very valuable lessons. We will see new trends appear that will linger well past the recovery stage, from the way that consumer behavior will change, the increased digital transformation of retail, and the smarter ways to manage retail supply chains. The system needs to be able to identify these patterns, learn from them, and suggest the best path forward. So at this point, we've covered quite a lot in a very short period of time, and we can certainly go into much more depth on each of these subjects alone. But with the big picture in mind right now, you may be asking yourself, how can I start leveraging AI in my business right now, today? One short-term way that you can leverage AI in your recovery is to run an analytic assessment service. So this is an analytic assessment on a retail AI system with your specific data set to highlight risks and opportunities in your business. The system will be able to identify what your demand and sales would have looked like under normal circumstances and determine how the pandemic crisis has affected your business. You'll understand which products in your business need the most of your attention right now. You'll determine the best set of actions under certain what-if scenarios and build strategies to maximize your ROI. And the report will suggest how you can allocate and balance your inventory to improve order fulfillment and meet demand effectively. Being able to see your data in a system, you'll actually be able to see a really clear snapshot of where your business stands today. So you'll be able to identify quick wins that will free up your cash, improve gross margins, and offer better service. We will continue to work through these items as well as many others with our customers in the days, weeks, and months to come. And we want you to know that we are confident that with the right strategy and world-class tools in our arsenal, we'll be able to come out of this crisis stronger and smarter. With that being said, I'd like to thank you for your time today. And we will now open it up to a live Q&A with Mark and Diane. So please, if you haven't already, make sure that you've entered your questions in the chat box, and we are going to get to them shortly.
All right. So we have a few questions right now that have been coming in, but they're all been coming in really last minute. So I still encourage everyone to enter the questions into the chat box. Also, we've received a couple of questions during this webinar that come from our existing customers on very specific situations. For some of these questions, if you are currently our customers, we will follow up with you after the webinar. So for my first question, let's give this question to Mark. How is it possible to cut out spikes and dips caused by COVID-19 in our data?
Hello, this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
This is a typical question. Funny enough, this question comes not only during the current situation, but retail is all about anomalies and exceptions. There are periodically events happening in different locations, weather events, marketing events, like vendor problem events and so on. So one of the strong things that Retalon brings into the game is ability to identify anomalies and adjust data and extract only trusted data that we can act upon. So we've been doing it for a long time. It's core of our technology. We did it even for small spikes, and it worked successfully. So treating a large spike, which is happening now, we'll use the same methodology, and it will be even easier to do because we know exactly when it started, to what extent, and it would use the same technology that we're using all the way through in our common analytics platform.
Okay, this is actually a similar, my next question is a similar question to one that Mark just answered. This comes from somebody who just sent in a question through chat. Mark, can you elaborate on cleaning data, please? Any specific actions recommended?
Yes, so there are several actions that should be taken. It really, I don't want to go too technical, but for certain products, we would have to freeze level of demand. For certain products, we need to incorporate different distribution to stores depending on what stores were open and closed, and contribution of each store in the overall picture. We need to emulate certain processes like frozen shipments, how the system would act as if the shipments were in place. So there are several steps that have to be taken across our platform to tune it. Basically, there was a slide saying that the main key point here is to emulate situation as what would happen if there was no crisis. So this is what we're capable to do. We will adjust all the necessary components for every retail organization to emulate the situation as if there was no crisis, account for all the trends, and come out with the forecast going forward, ignoring this period of time or tagging non-trusted data and adjusting them properly.
Okay, so thank you for that answer. And I'd like to ask everybody who is watching the webinar, go ahead and enter your questions into the chat. It's important that we have discussions over this topic. The more ideas and perspectives, the better. I have a question here for Diane. Dan, are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So what exactly should happen when products start reaching end of life cycle?
Well, there's going to be multiple situations that happen, and it all depends on the type of store that it is. For example, If it's a store that's spread across the globe, then they will likely open at different times. There's a different seasonal pattern for each one of them, different weather, so on and so forth, that will have an impact. So the first thing that our system actually does is it identifies where that product can actually be sold before it hits the end of life. So it understands how many products we have, how many we need to sell in order for it to be sold before end of life. If it hits the point where we've exhausted what store it could be transferred to, at that point we look at, as we talked about here in the presentation, doing a markdown and finding the optimal price point to maximize our profit margins.
Okay. And you know what, Dan, since we could actually hear you significantly better, do you mind answering the previous question, because we were losing you there a bit? And the question was, how can someone get started with this if we don't have any of their data?
Okay, so this is very similar to most customers that we work with today. Before we start working with them, there's about 5 data points that are really critical for us to be able to kind of get that information. So we typically work with the technology team to be able to get that data. And then we take that and we run an analytical assessment through our system to be able to identify the opportunities that these companies face, where we can help. It really does help businesses understand the opportunity of moving forward, what the losses are by not accounting for the changes or taking into account the AI.
Okay, I understand.
And for when we look at time, someone didn't ask about the time, but typically a question would be, how long would that take? And that can take anywhere between 2 weeks to run an analytical assessment to up to 4 weeks, depending on how complex or how large the database is that we're looking at.
Okay. Mark, let me ask you this. Mark, are you able to hear me right now?
Yes.
It says, so once an analytic assessment is done, what kind of action items can we expect to see? What would we see from this assessment? What kind of things can retailers expect to receive from doing this kind of an assessment?
Well, usually as a result of this service, we provide a report that highlight and prioritize the most vulnerable situations in the business and the most promising areas of improvement. So we may specify certain products that require urgent reorder or replacement. We may identify certain orders that should be stopped or cut, or price changes. Whatever it is, everything is based on one indicator, which is gross margin, return on investment. And we prioritize by the most profitable actions for the business and submit this report saying, we recommend to act in the following way. These are the actions, these are the expected dollar benefit from these actions, both short and long term. And that's pretty much what we do during the service. If retailer wants more specifics, how specifically to do it on product per product basis and so on, then that can be expanded later after the service, right?
Okay. Now, Mark, while we have you, why don't I ask you the next question here quickly. In the short term, right, as stores are being closed, how do we reprioritize for e-commerce?
Well, what we hear today is that most of our customers doubled their e-commerce sales quickly, and that's obvious because of the store closures. So obviously, as soon as this crisis will come to an end, or even some stores will start opening, we will probably see changes in trends in e-commerce, and we would react on it depending how particular retailer replenish e-commerce or fulfill e-commerce orders, whether it's from a particular DC or certain distribution centers. What should go down back to stores should be marked down. So obviously we would have to change our engine to react faster on changes in demand through e-commerce and brick and mortar store. and we would have to do adjustments for immediate reaction, as well as to adjust the data, as I mentioned previously, as if there was no problem, in order to build long-term forecast or plan.
Mark, how do we predict demand for the new 2021 product SKUs if we have no real forecast data during 2020?
You mean we don't have sales data or forecast data for 2020?
So the question that I have here is, how do we predict demand on new 2021 products and SKUs if we have no real forecast data during 2020?
Well, Jan, this question is hard to understand because it says if we don't have real forecast data for 2020, we have forecast data. The forecast might be not accurate or not matching sales in 2020, but people do have forecast for 2020. It was made probably in 2019. So this question requires clarification. Let me make an assumption that our forecast for 2020 was not accurate. That's irrelevant, as we mentioned. We're not using this forecast to deal with 2021. We will use adjusted sales that happen in 2020 to extract the trusted data points, adjust non-trusted data points, and feed it into the system to project demand for 2021. So even the forecast for 2020 was not accurate. It will not be used in any projections for 2021 and shouldn't.
Okay. All right. So unless someone else has any questions, I'm going to give everyone a couple of seconds here to think about any questions they would like to ask Diane or Mark, and please put them into the chat so that we'll be able to see them.
I will say too, Jan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was just saying that if anyone wants to reach out after the fact as well, if they have more questions, feel free to contact us.
Yes. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that we're definitely going to continue to have these conversations, and we're going to be offering more information, resources as we go through this crisis together. If you have any questions on any of the material you saw today in the webinar or on the analytic assessment, you can email us at discover@retalon.com. And also this webinar will be created into a video that will be available on our website, and we'll send it to everyone through email. Again, thanks very much for your time this afternoon, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.